Hey folks, how's it going? Happy Wednesday. Hope everybody's doing all right. What a crazy week it's been this last week for me. I've been going through a lot with last week's Sun Neptune and Venus Neptune conjunction and the new moon on Saturday. I'm wondering how everybody's doing. I've checked in with a bunch of people who've kind of maybe been feeling similar to me, like a little overwhelmed and a lot of things coming up. How about you? Is anyone else just kind of feeling like they're coming up for air right now after last week? So yeah, last week there was, obviously we're in Pisces season. The sun has been in Pisces. And there was a Sun-Neptune conjunction last Wednesday, and then a Venus-Neptune conjunction on Saturday, which was the same day as the new moon. You guys are saying you're tired and drained, and yep. Yeah, so last week's energy was really interesting. Like, it was very disorienting, very tiring, very fatiguing. That Neptunian influence, especially meeting with the sun, is going to affect our vitality and our energy. And then meeting with Venus is going to come into the realm of relationships, personal, feelings of personal worth, beauty, our sweetness, right? Like potential for happiness. And so Venus, Neptune coming together on the one hand can produce kind of like bliss states, which I was in Saturday during the day. And then by Saturday evening, I'd completely transitioned into the opposite of bliss, which was like despair and, just a real kind of intense feeling of confusion, like not knowing what the point of anything was, a total despondency. And that's very much like a Neptunian kind of state where we can flux in and out of what feels like sublime connection and intuition and love and, just transcendent kinds of good feelings. And then it doesn't last. And that's part of the Neptunian, Piscean quandary, lesson, wisdom, and challenge, which is that things don't last. And anything that we think is solid is actually not solid. And so if you have been going through, like I've been going through, a lot of grief and feeling that, it's such a confusing time to be alive in the world. There's so much suffering. It feels kind of impossible to imagine that somehow the enormity of the catastrophes that are simultaneously happening will cease, In my personal life, I definitely feel like a lot of stuff is coming up that's just producing a really intense overwhelm, emotional overwhelm for me this last week. And the new moon was, I want to say, at a really critical degree point. Also, not to forget, last week we had the 1-year anniversary of the pandemic, like with these influences. So with Pisces energy, we're always working with the collective, and the collective is not the same as community, right? Like community, like we have more of an active participation with, or there might be a uniting around certain kinds of ideals or projects or goals or identities. The collective is everybody, everything, all time, all place. Everybody's arising from the everythingness together. And we can't weed that out. And we're really sensitive. Our bodies are sensitive. Our minds are sensitive. Our psyches are sensitive, and we affect one another. And if you have also been feeling like a lot is coming up for you, I just want to suggest that maybe you're also assisting with a kind of collective purge that I think maybe is happening right now, which I'll mention in a second with the new moon degree point. But for me, like the experience on Saturday was really intense. Like the feelings that came up for me at the new moon were so overwhelming, and they were a lot bigger, than me. And they were mine. I mean, they had to do with my own biography, my own feelings. But the amount of feeling, like the amount of emotion, like really didn't match what was happening in my day, what was happening in that particular moment. And I was lucky enough to be able to call someone who's a big support for me. And she reminded me that I'm a person who works with the collective a lot. This is my job, is to kind of like tune in with collective energy. And throughout my life, and especially throughout like this career path, I go through moments of purging where I have a lot of stuff come up for me, and it might manifest as physical symptoms, mental, emotional, psychological symptoms. And then I have to have some kind of release and catharsis. And the catharsis is often really intense. And so I couldn't stop crying, like I felt like this need to just kind of like channel the grief of the world on Saturday. Now, I know that there's a lot of folks out there who are really sensitive in ways that are similar to how I feel my own sensitivity. And I know that if you're tuning in here, there's probably a really good chance that you are also a person who's tapped into collective energy or who's working with it in some way or another. So if anyone else out there has been feeling like the amount or the intensity of feeling that's coming up, it's like you don't understand it. If you feel like you've been questioning your sanity at all, or like wondering if you're going to be okay, I just want to first let you know that you're not alone. I'm here with you. And then second, that maybe we are, doing the work that we're here to do, being part of the collective, which is experiencing a collective process. We're individual beings, we're our individual cells, but just like the individual cells in our bodies, we're all part of the same larger system. And so things that are happening in the world are really, really deeply affecting us, even if we don't know what they are, right? Like even if we're not consciously participating, we're still picking up on the vibes. And we're all paying attention to the places where we can pay attention. There's absolutely too much that's going on that any of us can pay attention to simultaneously. So wherever it is that you're tuning in, whatever you have capacity for right now. I'm reading a comment that someone felt themselves kind of having a medium experience, like someone, another kind of spirit kind of moving into them. And totally, it's like, shit is crazy. When you start to tune in with the psychic energy or like transpersonal energy, there's like, I don't know what they are. Maybe they're spirits, maybe they're other entity beings, ghosts, parts of ourselves, unhealed, unresolved parts of our own psyches that, kind of take over us. They can be ghost mechanisms, right, that live in our own bodies. So I just want to say that there's like a lot of stuff that's happening right now, and wherever you're tuning in, whatever you're able to give your attention to, and that might not be out in the larger world. A lot of people are going through really a lot in their personal lives and relationships, with their health, with their work, etc. Then whatever it is that you're tuning in with, just know that giving attention there is valuable. A lot of people leaving comments about spirits coming and going. Yeah, so I also had that experience on Saturday. I felt like I really tuned in with the part of me that was really impacted by my mother's death. She died when I was a teenager. I feel like I kind of tuned in with her spirit to a certain extent, also with my father's spirit, who he's still alive, but he's pretty severely mentally ill. And it's something that I struggle with, as a child of a person who is mentally ill. And who is psychologically abusive. If other folks, have had these kinds of experiences with family or caregivers, we're made by them, and so I felt myself kind of like working with a part of my psyche that I would say comes through my father's lineage, and I could identify it as his spirit, but it was also my own. But the stuff that was coming up was ancestral, it was collective, it was much bigger than me as an individual entity, but it had everything to do with what I'm going through personally right now. It had everything to do with the transformation that I feel myself trying to make within the realm of my very personal relationships and in the realm of my work and my being. So again, like there's stuff that's happening for all of us within this web right now. And the degree of the new moon last week was 23 degrees of Pisces. And this is a really powerful degree point. It's a specifically important degree point for a couple of reasons. So one reason is that this degree point is sextile. That's a 60-degree aspect to 23 degrees of Capricorn, which is pretty much where Saturn and Pluto formed their conjunction in January of 2020. And if you can recall back to last year, if you were tuning in with me at that time, or if you were tuning in with other astrology, with tarot also, a lot of people were talking about the symbolism of 2020 as being a death year, and being a year when we really needed to reckon with structures of power that were no longer not only not fulfilling their purpose, but were killing us, becoming kind of toxic in their decay. And so in 2020, of course, so much societal breakdown happened and it continues to kind of reverberate through the pandemic, within the political landscape in the US, and a lot of things that people were going through in their personal lives. I think the word reckoning is something that a lot of us could probably identify or resonate with from last year. So a sextile aspect is a lending aspect. It's kind of a catalyzing aspect, and the influences that are happening currently, last week, this week, yesterday, and tomorrow, are really working in tandem with this degree point that is specific to January of last year, and processes of breakdown as well as transformation that were catalyzed then. And I think all of us are going through, we're all here going through apocalypse. We're all experiencing the end of an empire in some way. We're all being faced with the enormity of what's going to happen in the future. A lot of what was coming up for me is kind of this feeling of, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to put my energy into, because the structures that have kind of been given to me as, this is what you're supposed to build in your life, and this is what you're supposed to think about wanting and committing to or investing in. None of those structures are making sense to me right now. And in a place when I'm in more of a healthy spot in myself, I can actually feel excited about that. I can actually kind of lean into the idea of emergence and intentional adaptation and surrendering to a mystery, But it's not always easy to do that. And in moments where it feels like there's a lot of intensity, or that loss is really close, or ending is really close, or pain is really close, feeling into that potentiality of not knowing and crisis is terrifying. So I want to acknowledge that I know, because I talk to you guys, literally every single client I've worked with for the last year has no idea what to do next. We just don't know. It's not a time, right, to know. In 2021, the astrology of 2021 is not about knowing. It's about asking questions. And I've been talking about this pretty consistently in the work that I'm putting out in my 2021 year ahead, and some workshops that I've done, that the answer we're looking for right now is a question. We don't know what the final form is going to be. And this year of 2021 is a year when we have to give ourselves to the experimentation of something. And we have to let go of the old forms in order to feel into the potential of what a new form could be. Because when we're still in the old form, mentally, emotionally, psychically, physically, we really can't imagine outside of it. What we can imagine is a kind of reconstruction of what we already know. And in order to really be in a visionary space of producing answers for ourselves and experiences for ourselves that really do give us the next evolutionary step, we have to surrender to this unknowing. And that is very much Pisces as an energy, is surrender to the unknowing. Yes, the answer you're looking for is a question. I have a workshop available on my website right now. It's Pay What You Can, if you want to check that out, because that's definitely what I'm working with, how to just be in this question. And I think with Pisces energy, which happens to be very challenging for me. I'm like mostly fire and air, some amount of earth. In my astrology, I have like one little lonely planet in Cancer. And yeah, Pisces energy is so hard for me this last month. I've just been like, oh, when will it end? I'm so excited for Aries season coming up. But this, what Pisces describes is the letting go of the self. It's letting go of the fixed form. It's the self undoing. And so if we want to think about, what is this, what are we trying to move into? We've got to let go of everything that we know. And that's not true for like every aspect of our lives, but I think to some extent, most people are experiencing that in some way right now. And that could be in the relationship to the collective, right? Like we definitely see this in the world right now. Like, here in the US, like, how do we move into the next thing? Well, who knows, but we've got to let go of the old thing. Like if we continue to build upon the structures of the old thing without really examining them, purifying them, cleansing the parts of them that, are toxic, we're just going to keep recreating the same structures. And this place of unknowing is a place of purging. And when we think about, or when I think about the sextile relationship between Pisces and Capricorn, and again, Capricorn is where the Saturn-Pluto conjunction happened last January, where Pluto still is. And last week, the Neptune aspect, Sun-Neptune conjunction, Venus-Neptune conjunction, were in applying sextile to Pluto. So this kind of like needing to purge, needing to release, needing to move into kind of more of a fear reckoning space was really strong with that sextile. Yesterday, the Sun perfected that sextile, and tomorrow Venus will perfect that sextile. So this week, there's also still this kind of pretty profound relationship between the personal planets in Pisces. Personal planets, me, my energy, is the Sun. Venus, love, happiness, contentment, sweetness, feeling like there are relationships that are there for you. These energies are working through a transformative process right now. And so there is a lot of this kind of purging or releasing quality at the moment. I'm going to say that probably there's an intuitive quality to that as well. So that even if it's like scary or uncomfortable, it's also like, you've got to, that you have to do it. And even if you're kicking and screaming and fighting against it, like you've got to. Your bodily process will take you into it. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, fatigued, lethargic, full of grief, full of confusion, recognize that that's a bodily process. It's a somatic experience, as well as a mental and emotional state. And if you can be with it and be present and not try and make a meaning out of it or not try and find an answer, it will be better for you, because this energy of Pisces, and definitely also the energy of Pluto, is really about not knowing. Okay, someone's saying they're struggling to separate intuition from anxiety right now. I feel you so much. Yes. And that separation from, the fear and the anxiety that can drive us and the intuition that can drive us. For me, I feel like the only way I can start to parse it out for myself is by going into my body. I want to say that it's not always possible for me to do that. I'm a person that's, I've experienced developmental trauma. I can disassociate pretty easily. If I'm really activated, if I'm feeling really triggered, when someone's like, go be in your body, I'm like, fuck you. Like, I don't even know how to get there. And I work as an embodiment guide. I have so many tools. I have so much training. I have so much support. And so I want to say that for folks, that haven't, received the kinds of tools and support that I have, it can be really hard to be in your body. And how we learn to discern between the fear and the anxiety and the intuition, I think, is probably a lifelong process. And a lot of people have different ways that they go about it. A lot of folks really like to use divination, tarot, scrying, astrology, whatever your, particular paths are. And reading into the symbolism also then requires a discernment, because I know that for me, like if I'm looking at Astro and I'm in an anxious space, I'm going to read all the negative stories into the astrology. I'm going to look at the aspects coming up and be like, oh my God, it's going to be horrible. And I've talked to my friends who are tarot readers, and it's a similar thing, right? Like I'm going to read into this symbol and just see the potential for pain. So a couple things around that. If it's possible to tune in with your body, with your physical body, and to tune in with your inner body, that can sometimes be really helpful. And the inner body, what I mean when I say the inner body is the content of your body that's deeper than skin, bone, and the larger skeletal muscles. So it would include your organs, it would include your fluids. And to be in like more of an organic fluid place in your inner body requires practice. It doesn't always emerge immediately as a sensation. Someone's in the bath right now. Good job putting yourself in water, swaddling yourself, right? Giving yourself containment. If you have someone you trust that can just hold you and not try and talk to you or like help you through your process, but just hold you and give you containment, that can be really helpful. Similar, like if you have an animal friend that likes to cuddle, sometimes just contact that isn't asking you to leave yourself can help you come into yourself. So if you're a person like me who can disassociate kind of easily and like float out of yourself, sometimes like a weighted blanket, right? Or being in a bath or wrapping yourself up or having someone hold you can help come into the inner experience. I have almost 100 guided meditations on SoundCloud that are free, and a number of them work with connecting with your inner body, listening to your intuition, moving through fear. They are all offered from my personal experience. They're all tools that I need. And through my experience of like being an embodiment guide and working with astrology, I've realized like these are things that other people need and can benefit from too. They're totally just one option, one possibility. There's a lot of people right now who are making somatic work available and accessible. You can find like free guided meditations, free classes. Breath work, I think, is really helpful. I've been doing a lot of breath work recently to move through states of fear and anxiety, and kind of open up some inner space. So the second reason this 23-degree point is important, and this one is, really important, so take note, is that next April in 2022, Jupiter and Neptune will form a conjunction at 23 degrees of Pisces, and that's the degree point that the new moon occurred at on Saturday. So when Jupiter and Neptune are both in Pisces, it's pretty special because they're both the planetary rulers of Pisces. Jupiter is the traditional ruler, Neptune is the modern ruler. And when they're both in that sign, we have a huge expansion of all the Piscean potential. So we have a huge expansion of sensitivity, of intuition, of connection with collective energy, connection with spiritual or like non-material energetic energy, the ability to tune in with subtle frequencies, psychic capacity, deep compassion. This is definitely some of the more elevated Piscean kind of qualities. And the compassion that arises when we really feel our non-separation. And I think that's one thing the pandemic is doing, it's like really in a very blatant way telling us we are all connected. I was listening to something on the news the other day, someone talking about how the United States and other countries in the global north have been hoarding the vaccine. The US has 3 times the amount of the vaccine that it needs to immunize our entire population. Meanwhile, countries in the global south are struggling to vaccinate their populations. We won't get through this pandemic, right, unless the entire globe is taken care of. We are not separate. We breathe the same air. We drink the same water. We use the same resources. We may be having entirely like different experiences, but we are connected with one another. And we're getting a lot of lessons about that right now. And I think probably in your personal lives, maybe similar to me in my personal life, you might be getting lessons about the psychic connections that you have with people and the way that energy speaks louder than words sometimes, you know, and you can have in your head or speak through your words, blah, 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 like all the things that you think you're doing and you think that you're up to. Meanwhile, the energetic state is translating. You know, people can feel your vibe, or they kind of get a knowing, or you get a knowing, right? And there are ways that we are really influencing each other and connected with each other that have nothing to do with what's going on in our conscious brains and in the logical parts of our brains. So the new moon on Saturday dropped like a little, like a acupuncture needle, right, in this kind of meridian space of Pisces, where next year we're going to have a big expansion. Jupiter and Neptune together, really big expansion. Now, again, Piscean energy, Jupiterian energy, Neptunian energy can be super overwhelming. It, you know, and we can see it now, you know, if we don't take care of the problems that are arising in our interconnection, then by this time next year, basically, you know, April of next year, the problem is going to be so fucking massive. It's already massive. Now we have an opportunity, right? Like the entire world has an opportunity to collaborate and try and care for each other and figure out some kind of new systems. We have to take this opportunity. If we don't do it, then a year from now, we don't want it to get worse. If we do it, and not to be like, my tendency is to sometimes be pretty over optimistic and dreamy. So if we do it, I don't know if we're going to get to this place of like, la la la, everybody all connected, everybody's one, like feeling so supportive of each other. But we might get to a place where there's increasing support and neural pathways being developed in individual and collective consciousness that teach us that when we take care of one another, we take care of ourselves. When we do what's required in order to participate with a greater well-being, then we, as part of the greater whole, are going to be taken care of. And it's going to make it easier for us to realize our own desires and to realize our own potentiality and to live into our dreams and connect to our inner knowing, right? And be sensitive people in the world. I talked to a bunch of people last week who all said the same thing. I just want to be. I don't want to struggle anymore. I just want to be. I was feeling that way. I just want to be, you know, and I feel like so many of us have this experience. Like if we could just be in our lives and we weren't constantly having to deal with whatever, you know, oppressive frameworks around who we should be or how we should be or what we need to do in order to play the game of some totally constructed system, we'd be fine, you know, like if we could just be, we'd probably be fine. We'd have everything that we need. We already have everything that we need. So that longing, that feeling of like, oh, I just want to be somewhere. It's very Piscean, very Neptunian, very Jupiterian, like this longing. I know that something is possible and I just, can I just reach it? So wherever Pisces is in your chart, wherever the 23rd degree of Pisces is, and someone commented that's conjunct their descendant, take some note like of that degree point in your chart and any aspects that it makes. Because between now and next year, at least on a personal level, I mean, you might not be able to affect much in the collective, but at least on a personal level, you can do this work. And the work that I would say this is, in the sextile aspect of Capricorn and Pisces together, has to do with reckoning and with understanding where we are attached to ego structures that actually keep us from tuning in with our own intuitions and our own knowing. And this is a good question, I think, to consider where that discernment is between fear and anxiety and intuition. I think a lot of times when I contact what is truly intuitive for me, I do not feel fear. I feel a sense of deep clarity and peace and a kind of quietude. And that is true even when the intuition that I'm connecting with is not the thing that I think that I want, that I think that I want to do. Even when it's like, oh, fuck, really? The clarity that comes in, the spaciousness in my body is profound. And when I'm connecting with the anxiety and the fear, I tend to be more up in my head, and there's more of like a squeezing and like frantic feeling in my energy body. So I don't know if that, resonates for anybody else, but check in with that, because we're learning some major lessons. And so again, wherever 23 degrees of Pisces is in your chart, if you have planetary connections, someone's saying it's conjunct to their Saturn. So for example, Saturn is a symbol of the work that we're here to do. It's a symbol of fathers and patriarchal figures or father figures and authority figures. It's a symbol of responsibility and the idea of should, right? And like who I should be. It's also where we get really committed to something. And so this particular aspect might be telling you, like, what have you committed to? Is it actually what you want to build? Is there something that you need to be letting go of? Is there something that you really want to be working towards and forming that you're scared to look at? What do you need to dissolve in order to move into this new space of growth and follow your intuitive knowing? Okay, so then on top of all of this, last week on the new moon day on the 13th, we also had Mercury finishing up its shadow cycle. So you probably remember we went through a Mercury retrograde last month, Mercury retrograde in Aquarius. And the shadow phase is the period of time when Mercury is traveling direct, either at the beginning or after the retrograde has finished. So before or after the actual retrograde, and it's passing the degree points it will retrograde over. So Mercury began its shadow on January 15th, which also happened to be a day when the moon was in Pisces. So if you keep a calendar or something, you might want to look back at January 15th of this year, 2021. You could consider Aquarius in your chart. Mercury was retrograde between 26 and 11 degrees of Aquarius, if you have natal planets there, contacts there. And, just consider, meditate on what have you been kind of working with in your head, in your consciousness. Mercury represents a thought process, a communication process, and what we do with information and how we integrate information and organize our thoughts. And so the Mercury retrograde times are often when we're rethinking things, or we're trying to differently conceive of something. We might be in an important communication or conversational processes where we're trying to work something out. So if you think back to kind of mid-January and the part of your chart that contains 11 to 26 degrees of Aquarius, you might get some clues about a process that you've been in. You might already just know what it is. Just what have you been thinking about a whole lot, And on the new moon, the shadow phase ended. Now, I also want to say that on January 12th, which was just a couple days before the shadow began, Mercury formed its first square with Uranus, and that was a square that occurred several times due to the retrograde. And so there have been some kinds of motivation or influences that are trying to get us to change our thinking about things, to update, to innovate, to wake up to certain kinds of mental patterns, nervous system patterns, awareness and attention patterns, and communication patterns. January 12th, when Mercury made that aspect, was also a new moon in Capricorn, and guess what degree? 23 degrees, right? So if you work with numerology at all, 23 equals a 5. A 5 is a transformational number. And this is a transformational year, right? So this is what I'm saying. It's like this whole year is a big question. We are really trying to change and repattern throughout this year. Repatterning requires reckoning. It requires purging and releasing. It requires being in a space of unknown and confronting what arises when we don't know, which I don't know about you, but for me, when I don't know what what I need to confront is my want to be in control. My desire to know what to do, right? Or to know what's going to happen. Like I want some control in a situation. When I don't feel a state of control, then I feel scared. Does anybody else relate with that? So now as we head into Aries season, Aries season begins this Saturday on the 20th. We've got the equinox. Mercury will also move into Aries in the beginning of April. But at the end of Aries season on April 18th, the Sun and Mercury will form their superior conjunction. And so this process that we've been in around the restructuring, rethinking, whatever is coming up for you, whatever you're associating to with this Mercury cycle, I want to say that yes, we've finished the shadow. Okay, so there is probably some degree of clarity and like a settling in of whatever it is that you're trying to think through or restructure. But by the end of April, when Mercury and the Sun form their superior conjunction, they're going to form it at the very last degree of Aries, at 29 degrees of Aries, which implies to me that by that point, we kind of figure out what we want. And so Aries is a self-identifying energy, me, myself, and I, the action that I want to take, what I need to do for myself. And Taurus is a sustaining energy that wants to build. So the superior conjunction is a time when our minds are really thinking strategically and long-term. We're able to hold a kind of historic perspective and think pretty logically for ourselves, but in a big picture kind of way. So whatever it is that you're kind of like really feel yourself mentally preoccupied with, and again, you might really want to tune in with where the Aquarius energy is in your chart, because that's what Mercury's really been working with. Whatever this process is, right? Like the answer you're looking for is a question. Something has been clarified at this point, and it's probably only recently been clarified around this new moon. And it might have a lot to do with feelings, Pisces, right? Like your feelings, your intuition, discerning for yourself, what's fear, what's anxiety, what's resistance, what's actually what you want. How do you listen to that inner voice? The Pisces Capricorn sextile is telling us we need to restructure and we need to let go of old structures in order to move into the new thing. So that part might be starting to become a little more clear at this point, and you might still not know what you want and like what kind of action you want to take. And so don't pressure yourself. Probably by the end of April, there's more energy to move and be decisive on something. So if that means anything to any of you, I think astrology is super, super helpful for timing. Now, between now and then, Mercury is in Pisces. Mercury moved into Pisces 2 days ago on the 15th. And Mercury, the mental aspect in Pisces, is not really a decisive, knowing kind of energy when it comes to the logical mind or the frontal lobe of the brain, where we're like thinking about plans and what we're going to do. Mercury in Pisces is more the the back part of the brain, the pineal gland, the part of our brain that connects to dreaming and sleep. And dreaming and sleep states are incredibly informative, and they are also incredibly integrating. And because there's been so much coming up recently, I mean, people are really going through it. And I think, again, this last week has been a lot of stuff coming up. Over the next 3 weeks or so, as we move through Mercury and Pisces, I really want to encourage everyone to rest, to sleep a lot, to meditate, to pay attention to your dreams, and to give yourselves opportunities to let your mind wander. And if you're really trying to figure something out right now, relax. Because when you're trying to focus on it and use your brain to figure it out, you're probably tiring yourself out. And there's a good chance that you're actually disconnecting from your intuition. So over the next couple of weeks with Mercury and Pisces, if it's possible for you with whatever you're trying to figure out, if it's possible for you to not know right now and to not need to like take the action, but just chill, give it a couple of weeks, tune in, try and give yourself a lot of the support that I've been talking about, like go into your inner body, take your baths, wrap yourself up, breathe, meditate, dream, tune in with your divination practices, pray, go outside and connect with nature, like try and be in love with the natural world, like be astounded and in awe of the beauty of this incredible planet. That can really help integrate. All of those things can really help organize and clarify what's trying to get figured out. Someone says, no time left. What then? Okay, well, this week, to yesterday, the sun was sextile Pluto. Tomorrow, Venus is sextile Pluto. So there is a big kind of purging energy that is happening right now. There is a lot of feeling of, okay, like something might not be working, and I need to move forward. Now, if there's no time left and you're dealing especially with money, resources, and relationship issues, with the Venus issues, then I would ask if you have just another week, because on March 25th, Venus and the sun will form their superior conjunction. And so I said that Aries season starts on the 20th, Venus moves into Aries on the 21st, and on March 25th, Venus and the sun come together in Aries, right in early Aries. And this actually marks the second part of Venus's cycle. Venus has a 584-day cycle that began last June of 2020. Think back. Astrology is so fascinating, right? Like you could spend your whole life just looking at cycles and trying to remember what happened. So think back, June 3rd, 2020, Venus was retrograde at that point in Gemini. It forms the inferior conjunction to the sun at 13 degrees of Gemini. And that was the beginning of a cycle. And the Venus cycles bring us into evolutionary processes. And they help us mature and evolve in terms of our relationships and our values. So the deepening maturity that we gain through a Venus cycle has to do with experiences that we're having, with our own sense of self-worth, with, our own personal values. This has a lot to do with Venus energy, like what actually makes me happy? What do I want to invest my time and my energy in? What do I want to attract towards myself? What do I want to consume, right? Venus in its rulership of Taurus has a lot to do with like what we're attracted to and what we want to consume. And then Venus in its rulership of Libra has a lot to do with our relationships. How can I show up for my relationships? And Venus in its Libran manifestation is about right relationship and harmony. And right relationship and harmony doesn't mean a lack of conflict. Conflict can actually lead us to deeper intimacy and trust, but it does mean that we evolve in our relationships, that we're able to be accountable with them, that we can remember like our best selves when we're being triggered, right? And like really try and come to others with tenderness and transparency and accountability. So lots to think about right now. I hope that didn't add to anybody's overwhelm, all that information. I know that sometimes astrology in general and like me specifically can have that effect because it's just like a lot of information. So I hope that anything that you heard there can just, whatever's helpful, you can let it like land and rest in your body, and anything that felt too overwhelming, you can just kind of exhale it out. I'll put this video up on my page so you can find it and reference it again. And today and this week, I'm finishing up your Aries season horoscopes, your audio horoscopes. And Aries season is a really different vibe than Pisces season. Thank the goddess. There's a lot of fire and air energy in Aries season. And so any of you other fire babies out there, like if you're kind of feeling swamped by Pisces, just a couple more days, okay? Just a couple more days we get into Aries, and then there's a lot of kismet kind of synchronicities between Aries and Gemini and Aquarius, which I think is really going to help us. A lot of people, kind of like get out of the dampness of the kind of Pisces vibes. So check for those. Those will be out by the weekend. And I love you guys. I know that people are really going through it. I just want to say that it's so important right now to be gentle with ourselves and to be honest with ourselves, to do the work that we know that we need to do, and also to love ourselves for doing it, you know. And like the work that I think we're trying to do right now is hard, and we're not always going to do a good job, and we'll fail and mess it up and be a mess. And just the trying and the showing up for it is worth loving and appreciating yourself for. Be loving with your imperfectly perfect selves. Okay. Mwah, 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 mwah. I'll catch you again sometime soon. Bye, y'all.